Welcome everyone to the Co-Creators Convergence third Thursday Creator Convos. I'm Noelle Marshall, and together with my beloved Bob Warner.
Hi everyone, welcome. Wonderful evening to see you.
We call ourselves light partners, L-I-G-H-T partners. We don't like to call ourselves light workers because we really don't like to work. So we are also the stewards of a wonderful group called the Co-Creators Convergence. And I know some of you are new to this call and to us, so I'm going to pop over to screen share and just show you a 1-minute video about the Co-Creators Convergence. Here we go. So that is a little bit about the Co-Creators Convergence, inspired by our dear teacher, friend, Barbara Marks Hubbard. So I have a very wonderful friend here, Annie Spade, who I met through Unity Earth, I believe. And that is headed by Ben Bowler, or he's one of the co-creators of Unity Earth. And we have Ben's sister here tonight, Jenny Bowler. And Jenny and Annie have a wonderful evening planned for us. And without any further ado from me, I'm going to turn it over to my dear friend, Annie. She's a wonderful Teilhard de Chardin, a follower, teacher, a Montessori educator, and I just love her. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy this evening with my two new friends. Thank you.
Thank you, Noelle. It is so great to be here. I'm just so completely thrilled to be here with Jenny and to be able to help with her bringing this amazing opportunity for humanity to an online and global community. And I want to say tonight that it's morning in Australia and somewhere in the world, it's every time. We'll hear a lot about the story of her father's discovery, and really it was an uncovering of a sacred trust that the Aboriginal people 42,000 years ago, or thereabouts, revealed to her father over 50 years ago. And this began a journey for her family, but also for the human family. And I was reflecting today how this is really something that is wanting to come full circle. When you think that when Jim Bowler first encountered Mungo man and Mungo ladies' remains in the outback of Australia, that the remains were taken off to the British Museum. And then for decades, the Aboriginal people asked for these remains to be returned to country. And finally, that happened in 2017. And since then, we see how this has become a story for all of humanity. And so Jenny's father has always been so committed to this being something that was brought to children and part of Australian history learning, and Jenny has co-produced a curriculum for children around this finding and this story. And she also has expertise in multiple ways of knowing, including deep listening, which she learned from the Aboriginal people. I could think of no better way to open tonight than to share with you a song, and it's really a hymn that was written by Aboriginal people for the return to country that happened in 2017. And so I'm going to open us up, and this will be an opportunity to meditate on the way that this story is calling all of humanity together.
We Aboriginal people are universal. Our dreaming doesn't separate heaven from earth, as we are connected to the universe from the ground, our mother, to the trees, to the animals, to the sky, to the stars, to the sun and the moon.
I can hear them calling as they ride through me their song, and I can feel their spirits as they're singing me back home to travel across the land of our people still so strong to take it either back to where he belongs. So let's stand up together, bring your totems to our fire. Let's stand up together and bring the spirit back to life as we place them in the sand. Like the eagle they're so high. Let's stand up together as our tribes all unite. UNITY, rise as a unity. UNITY,
We are born with connection to our ancestors through our blood. Our hearts beat the same, whether or not we are conscious of it. Our ancestor spirit carries it and is connected to our spirits, just as every generation before. Our blood and our spirit is our key, not the colour of our skin.
one by one we'll take it to the top. A message from my dream. Till we get there, we won't stop. Won't you sing with me, my sister? Yes, sing with me, my friend. Sing with me, my brother. As one till the end. Let's stand up together. Bring your totems to our fire. Let's stand up together and bring the spirit back to life as we trace them in the sand. Like the eagle, they're so high. Let's stand up together as our tribes all unite. Well, U is for universal unity, and negotiations for peace are necessary. I is instill international integrity to turn the tides of tyranny. Why? Cause that's the way it should be when we all stand together universally.
Close your eyes and imagine it. Feel it as your spirit comes into consciousness. Connect to your ancestors. No matter where you are, you will always have your connection to your country and your ancestors, as your ancestor spirit will never leave you. Trust in it and let it guide you. We are all brothers and sisters in the global community. Let us unite justice, peace, harmony for all.
Let's stand out together. Bring your totems to our fire. Let's stand out together and bring that spirit back to life as we place them in the sand. Like the eagle, they're so high. Let's stand out together as our tribes all unite. UNITY spells of unity. UNITY spells of unity. UNITY.
When I traveled to Australia in 2018 at the 1-year anniversary of the Return to Country Mungo Man, the Aboriginal elders anointed our foreheads there at Byron Bay in Australia. And it was one of the most significant moments of my life when they declared that all of us were family and all of us are meant to be one. So stand up together, it's time. Jenny, I'm just so honored and blessed that you're here with us. Thank you.
Annie, that was so beautiful and such a privilege to be here with you all. That song feels like it's brought in the human family, the spirit, the ancestors. Jason Keller, you'll meet his grandmother soon. Such a powerful man, young man, emerging leader or leader in their community, who was speaking a lot of those words. I'm going to start screen sharing a minute, but just before I do, I just want to acknowledge that calling in of that community that you've done so beautifully, Annie, and you traveling to Australia because you've been called and felt the power of this story. And as Margie said just before we started the call, the reflection to begin more of a deep dive into our internal worlds is so much connected to what is necessary for healing. And Lake Mungo is a vortex for us to use land as a metaphor in so many lands to do that. So I'm really interested for you all just to really get a sense of where you are right now. I know, Pamela, you're wearing a snowflake earrings and people have got Christmas and dinners and birthdays and so much going on at this time of year. We just become aware of how you are being right now. And I want this to be an experience for you. This is not a slideshow looking at a sacred site. I would like this to be something much more than that. So we'll begin this journey and I'm going to take us, the first part, I will do about 20 minutes of just sharing Mungo and people and country and some of the backstory. And then we'll stop for 10 minutes and have a chat. And then we'll go into the experiential deep listening section. And if maybe Annie, if you can watch the chat, if there's things coming up there, if you want me to touch into. So I will start screen sharing. I will say while I'm getting the screen sharing organized that I was thinking about a business plan I was putting together. It must have been nearly 20 years ago. And I was writing that I really want to be around people on the edge of evolution and big thinkers. And so being here with you and Noel and Bob and Annie and Text, all who have helped me get here, I'm just so grateful and deeply thankful to that. I'm also looking at Barbara's work over the years. I was, exposed to her about 10, 12 years ago or something, and it just used to blow my mind and so stimulating, so incredible. Sometimes I was so spaced out with what she was saying. It was so big. And then I've gone on a journey in my own life I was around Aboriginal people when I first left school for about 3 years of volunteering in different communities. And then I saw that I was projecting a lot of my own stuff onto them, be it the spiritual or the pain or all that kind of thing. So I went on a search to look for other languages I went through astrology and symbolism and shamanic and all sorts of transpersonal counseling and deep music, all these areas. So I'm bringing some of that toolkit in here as we all are searching and learning and growing and developing all these various toolkits. And so I want to acknowledge also Ben, Unity Earth, who's helped get me here, my mum and dad. And when I was in a business, I was learning about business a few years ago, I was out door knocking, and I was only about 100 k's from Mungo, and I could feel the wind coming back in. And it was like my father's country blowing and trying to remind me to come back because I needed to help share this story. And I've been very privileged in the last year or 2 years to not actually be on social media, but in a very deep listening place, using music and the internet and connecting deeply. That has actually enabled this much stronger resonance and power to come through and help me open up to hear differently and to feel differently. So this is what the journey I'd like to share with you. So Lake Mungo, as you saw in that video, there's no pyramids or colosseums or Grand Canyons. It is actually quite a sparse. It's about 6-7 hour drive from Melbourne, about 12 hours from Sydney. And it's not quite desert, but it's a semi-arid kind of area. Not many Australians know about our history, but it is an extraordinary, it has become a cultural World Heritage Site known for its cultural and its natural history, called the Willandra World Heritage Site. When my dad was out there, he's an earth scientist, he's a climate change scientist, and he was out studying he wanted to know why Australia had these fossilized lakes that had no water in it and deserts or sand dunes that weren't moving, which spoke about some ancient climate. So he went and started researching all of that. And his climate story went back 500,000 years. And as he was searching through the climate story, he actually came face to face with the oldest ancestors, the oldest ritual burials in the world, which I'm also going to share with you. So this story is connected to, as Annie said, our global, our human story, our collective spirit. What is that? The first humans, as we know, came out of Africa, 100,000 years, or in Africa, 120,000 years, and reached Australia around 60, 70,000 years ago. I've heard people say that whoever came across that water back then, they were the first seafaring people, the first people that got in boats that actually left the boundaries of those continents there and traveled to Australia. So therein was a big leap, one of those consciousness leaps that I'm sure Barbara probably talks about. So what does it mean to be a modern human today? We're going to be looking at ancestors, the remains of two people that were alive 42,000 years ago. And so sometimes it's so hard to grasp that timing, and I try and find different ways. But if we in Australia here, and there's quite a few Australians on the call this morning, if we travel back 250, if we're talking in kilometres, we would walk 250 kilometres to meet Captain Cook and the people arriving here and our history. This is what, of course, kids are being taught up until recently. The history of Australia is 250 years. In America, I'm not sure on the American history, so I apologise for that, but is it around 400 kilometres would be, if we're going to walk back in time to these people. We pass the recent arrivals in America at 400 kilometres. And then the first peoples in America, the traditional people, Indigenous people to America, 15,000 kilometres. We'd keep walking. And in Australia, we now double that 15 to 30, and then we would double it again. So we would have to walk 60,000 kilometres to get back to Mungo Man and Mungo Lady, or their people that arrived. And Mungo Man and Mungo Lady have actually from 40,000, they're dated at 42,000 years old. we're celebrating Christmas in a week. It's birth of Christ is 2,000 years ago. That's another 40,000. So they have returned. And my question to you all here is just sitting with what it is that touches you or triggers you or awakens in you. What is the message from this story at Mungo? So Lake Mungo is actually about climate change and ice age country, Australia, and what was happening in the ice age period here. It's earth science, so it's science, it's environmental history, it's the traditional people, the Aboriginal people, having been here over 60,000 years, the first people to occupy Australia. It's about their culture and the lifestyles of ancient Australians. And it's also a place over the last 50 years where the conflict of science and farmers and Aboriginal people being dispossessed and now reclaiming their culture and a regeneration of that actual environment and a World Heritage Site. So it's a massive story. So my dad did go on that walk, and that he went, you know, for 50 years, he's been studying out there at Mungo. But that walk and those years, those 50 years of exploring took him back to the 40,000 years. And the climate change story that he mapped, as I said, is 500,000 years. So what I'm wanting to look at here is we're expanding our perspective. And I was reading recently, I think it was Joanna Macy was saying that the crisis, our current crisis at the moment, is not one of technology, because obviously we have the technology to address things, but it's one of perspective. So in expanding and deepening our awareness, our perspective, things happen there. So that's Lake Mungo. So I imagine many people, when we talk about Lake Mungo, they would imagine that it's going to be full of water, which is fair enough. We actually have heard of people traveling out to Lake Mungo with boats on their car. And we laugh, but it's not very funny. The reality is people don't know about this history and they don't know the story. It's actually the lake, it's the land, as my dad will say, it's the land that is holding the story, that is telling the story. And you can see that what is known in Australia as a lunette, that's actually a crescent sand dune wrapped around well, essentially what's a fossilized lake. That lake was last filled, it hasn't had any water in it for 20,000 years. And that 20,000 years ago was the peak of the ice age around the world. So the Northern Hemisphere was covered in ice, and same as Antarctica. Australia was just, because it was such a desert country, there was no rain, all the water's caught up in ice caps, so it just became a great desert, and winds and cold. And, you know, how did Aboriginal people survive that? And we're going to meet two ancestors who were alive before that time. Many people around the planet didn't survive during that period. So the incredible tenacity and knowledge and wisdom and strength of these people to have lived in harmony and lived with the natural rhythms of the environment is some of the things that we're wanting to reconnect with ourselves. At Mungo, if we're just looking at 45,000 years, we're probably looking at around 2,000 generations. So I'd like at this moment to acknowledge the elders and the tribal groups that are now the custodians of the heritage site. They are the Barkindji, the Nyampa, the Mati Mati, and their ancestors who are here with us now, and the elders that are present and emerging. And for each one of us connecting into this story, we get a gift from it. But there's also something that is resonating with us in this gift. People talk about Aboriginal people in Australia giving non-Indigenous people a gift, but they don't receive it. They don't listen, they don't hear it. It's taken us all a long time to get to this place where we're able to hear it, or to even know that we need to hear it. Oops. Uh-oh. Looks like I might have uploaded the wrong. Yeah, I've uploaded a different presentation. Not a different presentation. You know, we just go with it. So what I'm going to do now is introduce you to Vicky. Vicky is the granddaughter of Alice Kelly and a cousin of Jason that was on that video. And she's going to just give us all a little blessing here. The audio is a little bit...
Hello to all my brothers and sisters right across the world. Here I am sitting on the sacred lands of the Wadi Wadi people who have been here for at least 60,000 years. And tonight I want to welcome you to my land. My grandfather's country is south of me, the Wamba Wamba people, and north of me is my grandmother's country, the Muti Muti people, from the very sacred lands of Lake Mungo. Traditionally, I would have a smoking ceremony to cleanse our session before we begin. But here in Australia, we have total fire ban days, and we cannot light fire. Even under cultural recognition or cultural purposes, we still cannot light fires for ceremonies. So I brought one of the most sacred things that we have to us as Aboriginal people, which is our water. Here is the land, here is the waterways that feeds the land of the Wadi Wadi, Wamba Wamba, Muti Muti people, the Murray River. And I've been gifted with the right to give people blessings of the water that comes from these riverways. So as a way of starting our night of acknowledging Lake Mungo, I bless you all with the water from the Great Murray River. The river that sustains us, the river that sustains our land, the river that sustains our animals, that feeds us, the river that connects us to all that has been. The river is the vein of the Mother Earth. So I bless you with the great waters of the Murray River here on my grandfather's country. Full stop.
Thanks, Vicky. I'm sorry the audio is a bit not great there, but you get a real feel of that land, and to be sitting there with Vicky on the edge of that river. The Murray River is in Mildura, which is the Mungo is 100 k's down the dirt track to get to. And yeah, so grateful. And Vicky's talking about the water. And so some of you might have water with you. I mean, as you guys would know, water's been on the planet since, well, I don't know how many millions of years ago, but it's the same water. So the water in the river, the water that was in Lake Mungo, that was in the Ice Age and in the ice caps, and what we're drinking, there's this interconnected, crazy, amazing energy about water. So just being aware of that connection between all of us, the clouds there, the water in the clouds, the water that erodes the lunette that's actually exposed these burial sites. So I actually uploaded the wrong presentation. This is a different E.C. Jones personal story, but what I, just trying to learn different ways of being and learning a little bit more about in schools here in Australia, people as teachers are being told they need to integrate Aboriginal or Indigenous perspectives. What is that? A lot of people don't, most of us don't really understand. And I've just been fortunate to be around some people, incredible woman that helped me with the curriculum, who's been around Aboriginal elders and teachers and in education in this area for a long time, and was fortunate to have some be taught in some of that area. But things like, even when Indigenous people introduce themselves, they introduce themselves from their father's country or their mother's country or their language group or their mob or their totem or the totem of their country or the stories of their country. We don't do that very much. We might talk about our career or how many kids in our family or something like that. So in the spirit of Indigenous ways of being a little bit more, this is not my father's country, but this is where he spent most of his time. My mum was actually born on that river, on the Murray River, about 100 k's from where Vicky, or a couple of 100 k's from where Vicky was. And she went off and was sent to boarding school and became a city girl, and met Dad, who was actually a potato farmer until he was about 25. And he wanted to get out of the little town and see the world. And his father, an Irish potato farmer, they used to see axes and stone tools and things left over from Aboriginal people on their property. And his dad was fascinated by, who are these people? Where have they gone? Of course, the land was all cleared. And, you know, where do these seeds get planted? And my dad ended up going on that journey and pretty much uncovered where, you know, some of this history. So before we were talking about 2,000 generations of people at Lake Mungo. And here we have 3. And what's extraordinary at Mungo is this coming together of cultures. And for many of those years, over 50 years, there's been a lot of clashes, a lot of pain, a lot of grief, a lot of trauma for Indigenous people coming back and fighting with the scientists, and the scientists then being knocked out of it, and just the Aboriginal voice being the only one heard, and then trying to find a balance. And it's an incredible, almost an alchemical landscape, really is. And Alice Kelly here, who's Jason's grandmother on the left, mother of Mary, who's also in this picture, grandmother of Vicky and Jason. She was the first Indigenous person to approach the scientists, and she was probably like Barbara Marx Hubbard in her culture. She was extraordinary. Like, she'd quote the Bible and just had this incredible mind, and she'd walk around with a dictionary so she could understand the scientists. And she worked with the scientists because she knew they were helping get their story out and helping people understand it. So the incredible wisdom there. And then that's a photo of me with my daughter, Olivia, and she's 21 now. So we've been walking, you know, in and out and together in this story, as we all are, with the Indigenous and non-Indigenous histories, be it in the countries that we live in or even in our own selves. So 3 generations. I wonder how many generations back you can remember. 3 or 4, 5. If we start going back more, 10, 20, where does that take you? Where did your ancestors come from? And we keep going back 30, 300, 1,000. And you keep going back and you keep going back and you keep going back. It's very hard to fathom. So the lunette has actually held the story and the history, and the wind and the rain has exposed it. It's because of the lake and the geology, and my dad's a geologist, so he's been able to, you know, recognize that part of the story. You see people coming together there. My mum with Auntie Mary and Auntie Lottie Williams. So, you know, we've had some amazing magical times out at Mungo. And every 2 years they have an immersion program for school children, about 300 kids and about 200 adults get out there and do a teaching kids program. And they're with elders and scientists and farmers and other Aboriginal mentors. And it's an extraordinary gathering of different knowledges and different ways of being together. So that's Mungo at the moment. As I said, I did put up the wrong presentation. So I did go 10 years ago, I worked with a curriculum writer, and we started to bring all this together, and using my dad's images and his work, we now have a curriculum. So at Mungo, you have the fireplaces, you have the tools, you have the lifestyles of what was happening 40, 50,000 years ago. This is where it's all coming together. So let me just check if I can see where I'm going with all this. Okay, it's all right.
And Jenny, if you need to reload something, we can edit it if you.
Yeah, you know, it's okay. It's fine. Thanks, Annie. So here we have, you know, the farm. It was a sheep farm 50 years ago. The farmer there, Albert Barnes, was stunned by what he found in the back of his sheep farm. On the left there, you'll see a fireplace on the bottom left. That's a 40,000 year old barbecue, still there. just in the ground, like an open air museum. It's quite extraordinary. So Lottie Williams has, she passed away recently, and quite a few of the elders photos here for Indigenous people that are watching, or we should say that at the front, that there are deceased people on this recording. So Mungo has been very special, really, because somehow when you get out there, you can lose yourself. You feel, I don't know, it's a space, I think, and I like it out there. Certainly space, when you're out there on the Lunette, the sky and the land are just so interconnected. And then you have their ancestors. People can go out to Lake Mungo and not see anything. And other people can go out there and have their life completely changed. I rather like the thought that these people might have been there so long. And I even was really pleased to learn about it. Otherwise, we would never have known. Even today, I still think there should be more studies on my people. So she's been such an incredible elder. These are all the different threads that come together at Mungo: the pastoralists, the government officials, scientists, traditional elders, the World Heritage. These are kind of very old photos. My dad's on the left, and Alice Kelly and Alice Bigby and other scientists in there. So what I'd like to share here is that Ice Age water table. So let's just have another look at the time spectrum. On the left here, we have the 0, which is where we are now. And we're going back 125, 130,000 years. And you can see the rising and the fall of the water table. If we look at that 20,000 where it says cold dry, that was where all the water was caught up in ice caps. That was the peak of the Ice Age, the glacial maximum 20,000 years ago. So the numbers on the left on this, but if the top there where it says warm and wet, that water dip is actually 120 meters. That's 120 meters sea level water lower than what it is today. So when we start bringing this story into Mungo and the changing climate that Indigenous people have lived through, climate change clearly is not debatable. Look at this map. Not only is that map 120,000 years, 125,000 years ago, the water table is similar as what it is today. That actual cycle, going back to connecting with nature, that actual cycle has repeated itself 3 times. A natural cycle over the past 500,000 years, repeated itself. The issue today that we're all facing, as we know, is the humans are now impacting the climate, which has never happened before, and that's the difference. So, with the curriculum and the studying of Lake Mungo, it's also about learning about the ecological consciousness. It's spiritual consciousness. It is evolution. Imagine how you would feel if you're out there at the lake and on that sand dune and saw a stone which your eyes were now trained to see was actually an ancient tool used over 40,000 years ago. So that's what's happening on the dunes out there. The wind, the rain, the elements, I keep revealing and exposing the layers of time. And Margie, as you talked about the interior, the layers of the interior, the layers of earth, the layers of self, as we go listen deeply and we go deeper back to these original or Aboriginal ways, that the industrial layer that obviously we have so many gifts from, being one that we're all on, which is this interconnectedness through the internet. But Aboriginal people having evolved here for 40, 50, 60,000 years, how evolved would they have been? And for those of us that are privileged to be anywhere near ancient people that are still connected to real traditional culture, their spiritual intelligence is superior to most of us. And their ability, their psychic, their psyche, their spirit, their community, their connection to land, to rock, to river, to totem, to animal, to sky, to stars, to cosmos, to story, to art, to dance. That's this country's been lived like that for 40, 50, 60,000 years. How much intelligence is in that? And how much of that has been wiped out? And the tragedy and the pain and the trauma that's inherent in that. So often when we go back closer to these places, we're hit with our own grief, a sense of grief, a sense of loss and the tragedy. So at Mungo, it's confronting. And it helps us remember and reconnect and all those gifts that come from that. And the beautiful feelings. When I first left school, I did some voluntary work up in the Northern Territory. And I was with these old women, Aboriginal women, and we just sat on the riverbank and they were still speaking in language and I don't know what they were saying. They were laughing a lot and probably at me. And it was just a memory that I held for years and years, was that presence. People just sitting, being together, laughing and cooking and fishing. You know, why is that so radical in this day? So I'm going to stop screen sharing and just come back, and maybe we'll just have a little chat before we go into the deep listening part.
Yes, we have a number of questions. Let's see. The last one that actually came up from Kathy Mason says, explorer John Turk stated that art and story is what saved humanity from extinction after the Ice Age. Would you agree with that?
Oh, wow. I'm not a scientist, so, or I haven't, yeah, you know what? I'm a messenger. So I am deeply moved by the elders, and I've seen the incredible work of my father, and as an individual, as a woman trying to find my place in this world, that's what I came back to, is music, dance, poetry. That's what made sense to me, imagery. So I can't speak to what happened 20,000 years ago, but I think many of us understand that how critical all of that kind of realm is to our own mental health and survival.
Yeah,
that's interesting what you're saying, but I imagine that a lot of cultures were already doing that.
Mm-hmm.
From what we can see. Although the cave paintings in France, I don't think they're any more than 20,000 years old.
They're 35. They go up 35,000. Yeah.
I'm not an academic.
Yeah. Well, I just happened to read about them, but yeah, it's interesting because you said something about how confronting it all can be in some sense, but absolutely, I agree that your many ways of knowing and the deep listening bring you back. And so it's probably always been true of humanity, who knows, but I would think art and story have been salvation. So Noelle is asking if they needed boats to reach Australia, how the seafloor is there. Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure on that, because they're debating what time spectrum that was. Was it 80, 70, 80,000? Depending on 80,000, we even have scientists, my dad's part of it, reviewing human occupation going back to 120,000 here. So who were the first people? We don't know, but it looks like they would have been rafts of some sort.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then another interesting question, when your dad came out with these findings, were they readily accepted, or did he have a lot of peer review going on? Did that take some time?
So the peer review is the 120,000 year thing, but as you'll see in a minute, the Mungo man and Mungo woman, there's nothing to debate. But what is debatable is the time. So yes, so when they first, 50 years ago, it was around that Mungo lady was found in 1968 and Mungo man 5 years later, they because my dad is trained, and as one of the historians here in Australia recently said, he had the eyes to understand the land and look for just the little nuances in the landscape. And so he was trained in sedimentography and stratigraphy and all that kind of thing. And he knew where he found the bones, I'll show you in a minute, of Mungo Lady, that it was around the 35,000 year layer in the soil. But when he went back and told the archaeologist, because he's not an archaeologist, so he didn't remove them. When he went back and told the archaeologists at ANU, the university, they didn't believe him and they ignored him. And so the belief here 50 years ago, only 50 years ago, was that Aboriginal people had been here for same as America, it's 12 to 15,000 years. Same thing, we just copied America, as we do with lots of things. So that was the belief. And Mungo Lady and Mungo Man changed history. And eventually the archaeologists came down and their jaws dropped, and Mungo Lady's jaw dropped out of their hands. And the history was rewritten back to 35,000. It's just since science has been updated with different luminosity and dating of soils, and that they've actually taken what they see now as more of a correct date, which is 42,000. So yes, it was debated. And then another scientist came in, a scientist that was part of that community, and debated that it was they were actually around 60,000. So yes, again, debated, and a big fight about all that. So there's lots of fights at Mungo. Scientists with scientists, Aborigines with scientists, Aboriginal groups. There's 3 tribal groups. They all, Barney. It's just, it's a place where everyone's had to learn how to find a voice and find room for their perspective and their reality.
So I'm going to just pass this one further question. Were they not ritually buried? I know the answer to this one, but are you going to cover this a bit for us?
Yeah, so they were ritually buried. And we'll look at those burial sites. We'll go into those burial sites now. And I very rarely show them on public Zooms. It's just such sensitive material. We've got permission from the elders to show them, but I'm not sure how else we can get this story out without sharing the photos.
Can you speak about it though? I mean, I think just talking about it would seem good to me, but.
Yeah, you can talk about it, but I think I'm going to show you and we're going to share it.
Okay.
We will do it.
That's up to you.
Wonderful. So I'll continue screen sharing now. And we're going to start going into more of the deep listening. So as we begin now to head closer into the environment, so Annie, you did say at the beginning of the call that the remains, Mungo Lady and Mungo Man, were taken to the British Museum. The archaeologists came down from the Canberra Australian Museum, ANU, Australian National Museum, and they took them back there in a suitcase. Mungo at the time was a sheep farm, and the Aboriginal people were dispossessed. They were on the river banks or in the mission reserve areas or on the edges of town, mostly 50, 60 years ago. And the going back to the university, and my dad, the science continuing at Mungo, Alice Kelly and 2 other ladies came forward and started reclaiming their history. So Mungo Lady was actually returned in 1993. And Mungo Man was returned 4 years ago. And the big issue here is you can see that man we're holding, that box that has Mungo Lady in it. Mungo Lady and Mungo Man both sit in little boxes like that, like little safes at the back of the dinky little visitor centre at Lake Mungo. It's a travesty and it's a shame. It's a national shame for Australians that this most ancient ritual burial in the world are being treated like that. They still have not been given a proper keeping place or resting place or acknowledgement. So we're very much in that right now. And it's really great to be able to share it with you, because I'm sure some of you might be touched by that your own sense of respect and power of this story, that the government right now has next 2 months until the end of January has a public comment period open for people to comment on what should happen to Mungo Lady and Mungo Man. Some of the Aboriginal people on the committee have wanted them secretly reburied and no one to know about it. And then many other people, traditional people, including Jason's family, the Muddy Muddy, and the scientists and people that really understand the significance of this World Heritage Site, actually want to have a recognition and a keeping place so people can go and pay respect and learn and connect. What that looks like, no one knows, but it's open for everyone to comment. So reconciliation involves change, changing ourselves and our view of the world. That's reconciliation. It's a big word, isn't it? We're going to step into a deeper part of the experience. So just now beginning to come closer to the land, connecting yourself wherever you're sitting or standing or lying, the bed you're on, the earth that you're on, the layers of earth and soil and warmth beneath you, or the coolness, the cold, the ice. Just start to become aware that this story at Mungo is actually almost, it's a vertical story of history. What's beneath us, the spirit, the ancestors around us, and that have actually resurfaced. Just beginning to slow down your breathing and tune in. You see up in this top right-hand picture, the layers. So they're the layers that are named by the scientists going back 10,000, 20,000, 40,000. That Mungo layer is where Mungo Man and Mungo Lady were found. They were exposed by the erosion. Golgol, 60,000. So the land is telling us, it's like a painting. And many of it, we'll all see that somewhere as we drive past or walk through nature. The layers that have covered up the people that have been here before. When once you're on the lunette, it's so eerie out there. It is, where some part of that lunette was a burial site for thousands of years. And you begin to hear the whispers of the people. I've heard people talking about hearing people singing or dancing or speaking to them. When I've been out there, I've felt that. When I was out there with my daughter, she was less than 1, and she was got a really bad cough and sick, and everyone was telling me I had to go back to hospital, and it's 100 k's plus away, dirt track, and I'm like, I don't want to go, and she's going. Anyhow, I talked to the elders, and they said she was fine the next day, but they also asked me to help them, and that was like. She's 21, that was 20 years ago. I had no idea what I was going to do. I wasn't even thinking about it. All this stuff has come through. So I'm going to play in a minute a time lapse. And I want you just to breathe into, whether it's at Mungo, the sacred nature, the spirit of the nature, the spirit of the people. If you're a scientist out there doing core samples and measuring data and you came face to face with something, sorry, this, as I said, my PowerPoint's a little bit wonky, but that's what Dad saw. But because he was trained in science, he knew he was seeing something different to rabbits or sheep. It was a sheep farm or animals. And he didn't know what it was. But that's when he rang the ANU and the archaeologist, and he knew, because of his layering and his understanding of science, that this soil layer was 30,000+ years. And I said, no one believed him. It took him nearly a year to come out. When they came out and they actually started dusting away that sand, that is Mungo Lady. That was a cranium that was crushed in hundreds of pieces. So I can't actually speak, and a lot of the anthropologists even can't speak to what that ceremony looked like. But the crushing of a skull is a ceremonial type of burial. And then Alan Thorne put those bones back together, and this is what it looked like. So the top layer is Mungo Lady, And they were just gobsmacked to learn that she had the same shaped skull as us, modern humans. They're going back to that question at the beginning. What does that mean for us 40,000 years later to still be modern humans? What evolutionary cusp are we on that Barbara Marx Hubbard and people are talking to? Some of it is recycling back to connect to this as one of the rivers that we're coming into stream with. And Jen, you mentioned it, you know, what your river and your flow and listening, the Dadirri. Joanna Macy talks about the river of grief and Indigenous wisdom and science, 3 different rivers coming together. And they come together so powerfully in this lake at Lake Mungo. So that skull was put back together, and before Mungo Lady was known and made known, scientists were actually going around grave robbing. They were digging up skulls from the National Museum in Britain, you're talking about, Annie, and from other museums around the world, and they're coming to Australia, and obviously Australian science people. And they were digging up hundreds of skeletal remains out of burial sites to prove that the people here were Neanderthal, or, you know, they weren't modern humans. As soon as Mungo Lady appeared, all of that stopped because there was no debate anymore. So Mungo Lady changed some of the trauma that was going on and the destruction. Then the archaeology team came to Mungo and they started doing traditional digs in the soil of those square things and just digging down. And they didn't find much at all. They found artifacts and bits and pieces, but they certainly didn't find any major significant ancestral remains. And 5 years later, my dad again was out there. I mean, he was out there nearly every year, but it was him that Mungo Man appeared to again. So we're talking about the spirit of this landscape. Why did this happen to my father? You know, he's a white male scientist. Why has he been endowed? I don't know. Maybe because he was studying climates. He was studying the land. He was deeply intrigued with what was happening. And these people came up and met him. So this is what he saw. And he rang the ANU, the archaeologists, and this time they came the next day because they knew something else was happening. And this is what they uncovered. Was a full skeletal human lying at the back of the sand dunes on the sheep farm for 42,000 years. So Mungo Man and Mungo Lady weren't dug up. They came back. So I don't know what it would be like being part of that team, brushing away that sand, seeing that face, being so close to this incredible mystery and resurrection of sorts from the history, from the layers of time. What you'll notice on that right-hand photo in the bottom corner is actually a fireplace. So there's a ceremonial fire, and around the top of the cranium was actually, I'm not sure if we can see it in this photo, you can't, but around the top of the cranium and the top half of the body was actually red ochre. And this is where they're getting the significant ritual burial from here. The red ochre covered the whole top of the man's, it was a man. And that red ochre, or ochre wasn't anywhere near, it was about 200 or 300 kilometers from Mungo. So obviously trade or travel was happening and people had the ochre. So they're doing a ritual burial, as my dad was saying, he's actually a very religious Catholic man. And he has Jesus on his bedroom on the cross. He has Mungo Man next to him and he has his own father. And he talks to all of them. And what is the message? How do we put flesh and blood? What is this story of these people coming back? And he will say what they are saying. What have you done to our country? What have you done to our people? So that ceremonial, the incredible thing at Lake Mungo is that ritual burial is happening still people are using fireplaces, as many of you would have experienced with the traditional people, the fire, the smudging, the cleansing, and a belief in some spiritual dimension 40,000 years ago. So I don't think Aboriginal people needed the internet. They had it. Their capacity to use song and dance and image to radically change things is well known, and to connect. So we're doing that right now in the internet. We've evolved to a place where we're not just in a local community now, we're in this international community, and we're diving deep into a local story that is now an international story. And they're the farmers with the archaeologists at the back of that sheep farm. Their life changed forever. They then, essentially gave it to the government for next to nothing. It became a national park and eventually a World Heritage Site. So when we look at this LUNET now, you probably have a different perspective on what that actually looks like, what's going on in that sand dune, a different feeling, a different awareness of the land, a different connection. So we're about to just have a music experience, and I'm wanting you now to enter into that landscape, to shut your eyes and, well, no, not shut your eyes. We're going to do 2-3 minutes of just a visual time lapse to go back, to do that long walk, back 250, 400, 12,000, 15,000, 40,000 years, to when people were living so, I was about to use the word simply, but Aboriginal culture is definitely not simple. It's so complicated and rich and amazing, but living with the land very simply and sustainably. So some of you might know of the movie, The First Footprints. I'm just going to shift my screens here and show you this video, share this video with you. So just use this music and imagery to take you wherever it is that you might go. just want you to close your eyes and tune into what it is that's sitting with you right now, what's emerging, what's coming through for you. I'm going to play another piece of music, but this piece we're going to use the deep listening. So keeping your eyes closed, or just in your own self, if they're open, just softly open. What are you connecting with? What gift is coming? What's opening up for you? being with what you're sitting with now, and connecting to what's present for you. Just breathing with it. Any message, any feeling, insight, image. In your local self, space, country. As we come back into the circle at Mungo, together. That's what Mungo does to people. It helps us to connect deeply to earth, to country, to spirit, to land, to each other, to different ways of thinking and seeing the world. So I'm going to, looks like my screen has stopped there. Annie, are you there? Annie?
Yes, yes. Thank you, Jenny. Wow.
Calling back Annie. Noelle, if people would like to join me, I will share. There's a professor here in Australia that says for non-Indigenous people, doing the work of connecting back to country and the spirit in the land is actually what helps heal Indigenous communities. In Australia here, we talk about closing the gap for Aboriginal people, and of course in education and health and things like that are so essential, but we don't talk about closing the gap for non-Indigenous people and what work we need to be doing. So history is a story told by many storytellers that links the past to the present. Through an understanding of our own and other stories, students develop an appreciation of the richness of the human past and its implications for the future. And this is the endeavour that I'm on the edge of, is getting this back into the schools. So I'll finish with Vicky and stop. So Vicky was I'll just see if I can, just a second.
Let's take this time. Everyone, turn on your video if you're open to that, so we can be ready for some conversation.
Yeah, so Auntie Vicky Walker, who's Alice's granddaughter, was handing the water. She started with a water ceremony and she's returning the water to the river. And with Aboriginal people and traditional cultures, as many of you would know, there's a giving back, the reciprocity back to the earth. So there's a giving and a sharing with each other now. So thank you. Thank you, Annie and Noel and Bob. And I'll stop there.
Goodness, thank you so much, Jenny. I'm gonna, just a powerful experience, so precious. I had a sense of sound that didn't even go in my ears. It was just, wasn't even the brain. It was really transformative, different experience. Bob described. Bob says, mystery every step of the way. And still for those who gift themselves with pause from the totally distracted modern world to ponder the continuing mystery.
Yeah, absolutely beautifully said, Bob. That's it.
I invite everyone to open up your camera and join the conversation. Love to see your shining faces and hear you speak about your experience or any questions that you'd like to bring into the group. Noelle, if you're speaking, you're muted. Shima.
But Jenny, I would like to say that it was very powerful, to imagine and that song reminded me of, and the stars, those clips reminded me of my own grandfather, you know. And because of so many changes, we don't see that sky filled, star filled stars, sky. And these rituals, I could relate it to my own, rituals over here that we do with the water and the leaves. There is so much of similarity I could trace, and it was very heartwarming, those pictures or those things. Yes, thank you.
Thank
So
you.
I would like to say that many times, I've heard it from a lot of people. Like you shared about your dad, like he kept the picture of Christ, he kept the picture of Mungo Man, and he kept the picture of his father on the table, and he spoke to everyone. So there is a divinity in all these things, if you can see, and I could so much relate to that. And yeah, it transcends those things, the humanness, or the collective wisdom that indigenous people have transcends all form of layers, be it faith, be it gender, be it area, be it landscape. It transcends because, and I like to say that we all are indigenous for that matter. It's just that some stuck to the land and some floated around. But yeah, you after floating, you come back to the land itself, right? That's where the core is. So yeah, it is beautiful in that way. Thank you for invoking and triggering these thoughts. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Shalini. Shalini and I know each other from the Deep Time Network, which is such a fantastic program to help understand this huge journey we're all on. And so, Shalini, I could listen to you all day. You just encapsulate and say things so beautifully. And it's really beautiful, powerful to hear how it does transcend cultures and race and our individual humanness, as we have these similar ways collectively. Thanks.
So Tex has a comment or question.
Thank you. Thank you, Annie, for hosting the conversation, for Noel and Bob, and Jenny for presenting and connecting us to Mungo Man and Mungo Lady. It's been very awe-inspiring and also humbling to be able, through this medium of Zoom, digital technology, to connect to the past 42,000 years ago, and with you and others on different continents right now. We can see how humankind is evolving as much as the cosmos is itself. We're part of the cosmos, we're all evolving. But we are evolving in our capacity to become aware and to consciously come together to acknowledge where we come from, where we are, and hopefully to be able to together to collaborate in solidarity for the common good, so that we may have a better future. So it's really, as I say, awe-inspiring, humbling, and at the same time, I feel reverentially empowered. And I thank you, Jenny, that you don't come to us as an expert, and you just, as you said, you are coming to us as a messenger. I think each of us, human beings, man, woman, we can be a messenger for the best of our becoming. Thank you very much.
Tex, you're always, again, able to put things together and bring it into the now, this, moving forward together. Why do we look back 40,000 years? What for? And then we hear the common rituals and the opening of our own minds, and then we have this collective field that we're all sitting in. So we come together. and move together. Thanks, Tex.
Jenny, there was one question that came in through Facebook about how can we imagine this lecture talk for youth? And I know we're going a little bit long, if that's okay, but I just think this is such an important question that we have someone that really wants to know how to share this.
Yeah, I've unpacked this and actually developed 2 curriculums, one for primary and one for secondary. And we deliver that. We deliver the big story, the earth science, the archaeology, the geology, the ice age story, the earth story, and the wisdom of the ancestors, and not just ancestors, but the Aboriginal Australians and currently what's happening at Mungo. So that's all in a curriculum. It's definitely possible. Absolutely. I mean, kids are much more receptive. We don't have to climb over hurdles to get to the imaginary layers, do we? I've been in a classroom for 50 minutes. Kids have never heard about it. Of course, I'm familiar with parts of the story. I spoke to them for 40 minutes. I played 2 minutes of music, and I could show you photos, but 40, 50 kids in the classroom had completely different drawings, and they all had an experience of being at Mungo. They were dancing with the eagles, doing rituals around the fireplace. The one had Mungo Man, a Chinese girl had it in this very stylized layer upon layer, and this man sitting huddled underneath all the layers. I mean, dramatic. So thanks for asking the question. That's actually where my work is getting it into the schools. I've done the work to do it. I actually have to tidy up the website and really consolidate schools in Australia before I'm really trying to broaden into other countries. But if anyone's interested, Noel, I will send you I'll send an email for anyone that does want to write to the government here. I respond to that public comment as well, and maybe international voices recognizing the power of this story is also very powerful. If I can send you a couple of links, Noel, and maybe you can share that by email.
Absolutely, absolutely. As many people I have the emails for, I'd be happy to do that, and I can also put it on the Facebook if that's okay.
Yeah, great.
Wonderful. I thought you did have a new website coming out soon. Is that right?
Oh, yeah, the Mungo curriculum, it's an amazing curriculum. I've had, I don't know if you know, Peter Blaze, who from the Earth Charter, works with the Earth Charter. He's an educator, and he says it's just a brilliant curriculum, which it actually is. It was written by also a woman who was Montessori principal, so it has elements of that throughout it. She's integrated Aboriginal perspectives. So I can do a whole other talk on that, but that's not what I was I was giving you an experience today. We can do that one next year.
Next time.
You're educated.
Yeah.
So, Jenny, we had another question from Becky Suzak, who is here now with us. She says she read somewhere that Mungo Lady's bones were twice burned. Do you know anything about the significance of this, as opposed to just?
Yeah, thanks, Becky. Hi. Becky works together with Ben, my brother, closely, and they do magic over there at Unity Earth. I actually, no, I haven't read it. So you sound like you've read more than me on that. No.
No, it was just, I was reading this book called From Here to Eternity, Seeking the Good Death. It's a fascinating book about different rituals of building pyres and burning bodies. And what was interesting in this particular section, it reflected, I couldn't believe it. I'm reading a book, I'm relaxing, I'm not on the computer, and there it starts talking about Mungo. And I'm like, I actually sent it to Ben. I'll have to send it to you too, Jenny. But then it talked about how the bones they've believed were burned twice, but it didn't explain if it was a ritual. And then I wondered as well if there is any historical reference to the burning of bones, the fact that Mungo Man was found beside a fire where his bones burned intentionally as well. And, we have a practice today of, cremation in some countries. And so it just fascinated me to think that there may have been an intentionality and a ritual behind twice burning a body of a beloved deceased.
I think also the crushing of the skull is also a ritual. Like that's not done out of, any other. It sounds like I haven't read much anthropology around it, and I don't know that, it's very difficult for anthropologists are using their imagination 40,000 years ago. One of the amazing rituals I have read about from in traditional people in the Kimberley, the ancestors are buried, and then a year later they go back and dig them up and bring them back, their bones back to the community. So it's very difficult. The Aboriginal, the 3 tribal groups at Mungo are collectively having to make a decision about what to do with Mungo Man and Mungo Lady and another 130 remains that have been found over the last 40 years. There's the people that are holding their culture and trying to honour their ancestors and their elders, and so it's a very fraught area. A lot of, as you know, Becky, there's a lot of tension with all of this right now.
I do have one question, Jenny. Have they done DNA?
Oh yeah.
Is there anything to do DNA on?
Yeah. So that's why Mungo Man was left at the uni for so long in Canberra. So certainly the people were doing DNA. They do want to, scientists are trying to, and they're given the government are trying to position it so there's keeping places. So in science in the future, we looked at the generations in that story. There are 2,000 generations. Me, I've been around 3 generations with Mungo. What about our next generation, 7 generations as Indigenous people look at? What's the science going to be in 7 generations? They're going to, in Australia, they're talking about Aboriginal people in Australia have different DNA to what's coming out of Africa. They're connected to the Divinian, I think, the Eastern Asia, and only Aboriginal people and some people up the east of Asia have this DNA. So there's a whole science heading in this divergent direction, positioning Aboriginal people not having come out of Africa.
Wow. Okay.
So my dad just recently, I normally wouldn't go there, but he just spent 10 years studying a little site about as big as a coffee table for a fire and shells that are dated around 120,000 years. And there's 3 other sites in Australia that have people being here potentially at 120,000 years. So if that does come through and if that's collaborated and supported, that changes global human movement of people.
So
thanks,
I think everyone's trying to wrap up here. I have to make a comment here. You mentioned about your father and that he had certain pictures and things. I'd like to call in that it's quite a devotee of Teilhard de Chardin. And to me, that is so significant here, especially when I heard your father speak about this whole thing as where science met the dreaming, where he clearly could bring in how science and mysticism could come together in noting that these people, Mungo Man and Mungo Lady, had been ritually buried. So I think your father brings that as well to this revelation that came to him.
Exactly. He definitely does. Do a talk, maybe March next year on education. We'll try and get Dad on for 10-15 minutes.
Fabulous.
He's old now. He's 90. He'll be 92 then. But yes, he's powerful, isn't he? And he's speaking, and he brings all that together so dramatically, including the Pope and St. Francis, and everyone's in there.
Well, and the thing too, and again, just having heard your father so much that he's not laying it down until this lays down. He's just restless until this comes full circle, as I mentioned in the beginning. So just wanted to call that in. We have Shalini with another comment or question. Noelle, was there someone else that we need to acknowledge before we wrap up?
There's some other wonderful comments. If you want to save let me just say, Seema, if you could just have a short comment, because we do need to wrap this up and let Jenny get on with her morning. So go ahead, and then we'll wrap with that. And I do want to talk about what's going to happen in the next following 2 Thursdays here. You're invited back every Thursday night. Go ahead.
I just wanted, like everybody was, saying the importance of skull crushing in a birth ceremony. So
Shalini, you're
ritual.
breaking up some. Can you do, Shalini, we can't hear you that well. Can you do something about your
Am
audio?
I audible now? Am I audible now? Maybe I'll switch off the video so it will be better.
Okay,
Am I audible now?
I think that's better.
Yeah, because of the internet maybe. So I was saying that in one of the Indian culture, that is Hindu, in Indian religion, that is Hinduism, the skull is associated, the skull crushing ritual is done to ensure that the last attachment of the spirit is, broken from the body. So it is again one of the most ancient. So that might be the ritual. I'm just guessing. I thought that everybody's wondering. So there is another alternate perspective to that. The other thing is that, my tribe, I also come from an indigenous tribe called the Mundas and the Munda. So we consider ourselves as Astro-Asiatic, that word is there that we, so maybe when Australia was linked to this part of the, tribe. So again, our DNAs are a little bit different, but then there are a lot of controversies. And Mungo man for that, or Mungo lady, it reveals those layers, that alternate theory. And in an intellectual circle, it is generally not very accepted. But it was nice, for me, that is a, far relative representation in a global platform. So I just wanted to affirm that aspect. Yeah, my tribe is grouped into that Astro-Asiatic, language group, which covers this part of the world. Yeah. So even if I'm in India, that way there is a linkage there.
Yeah, for sure, Selene. And I was just talking to somebody a few days ago who was talking about up in the northern part of Australia, cultural stories will be intermingled with Muslim stories. And that is over the last 1,000 years or a bit less, Indonesia and the fishermen, fishing people that were actually Muslim.
Yes. There was a movement, maritime movement from there. I think so. I'm taking much of time, but yes, there is a linkage there, which is not, I think so, documented in the books, but it is on just, what do you say, in oral traditions, it is there.
Yeah.
So yes, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's amazing. So we all come at it from different perspectives, whether it's, looking at the measuring and the science and what was the ritual, or, the story of the trauma Aboriginal people have gone through, and then coming back to what Margie said at the beginning, is, as Robert Sardello said, unless we become more interior, I don't know whether it was Jung that said it, the deserts of the world are expanding because they're reflective of our lack of interiority, our lack of connection to the earth right now, and our disregard.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, Noel, Bob, bringing this to some kind of closure, Mungo has become an internal landscape for me, and that's the gift I'm wanting to give to you.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you.
Mungo as an interior landscape. And as I say, the Aboriginal people were very clear. They invite all of us to share the joy of Mungo. I mean, really, it's an amazing, beautiful story, and warms my heart in terms of humanity's original purpose.
Yeah, and I will, Auntie Mary Pappen, who is the daughter of Alice Kelly, will say Mungo is there to, the ancestors came back, Mungo Lady and Mungo Man, to educate not only the warring tribes, but to bring them together, but to educate Australians and the world about the longevity of this culture.
Yes.
Wow. Very powerful, very powerful.
Well, we have another little treat after this. So for anyone who can hang on, we will probably want to go off of live Facebook. But
you want me to? Well, can I say something about next week?
Sure, please do. Please do.
So next week, some of you know that Bob and I were part of the Birth 2012 celebration with Barbara Marks Hubbard and people. many recognizable names. I'm not going to go through them all. It was a 2-day celebration at Agape Spiritual Center. And what Barbara Marks Hubbard called December 22nd, 2012 is day one of the new humanity. And it was a 2-day celebration. It's been condensed down to 2 hours. And so for the next 2 Thursdays, I'm going to be showing 1 hour of this. This recording, it's a DVD, was only given to, I don't know, not very many people, like about 50 people. I don't know how I ended up with a copy. And it's wonderful. So you'll see Barbara in her almightiness and so many others with their messages that we can so that's going to be for the next 2 Thursdays. So it's going to be Birth 2012 Redux. So join us, please, if you like, and we'll have discussion afterwards. So if you like.
Join us December 23 and December 30th in 2 parts as we revisit a planetary celebration of Birth 2012 and share our evolutionary journey. See you there.